This is Str8 No Chaser, the podcast where we break open identity, intimacy, and crack open ideas that we live with every day, but rarely question. I'm Kelvin Blunt. If you're new to the podcast, some of the topics covered here are part of the Str8 No Chaser series on Substack and a docu-series in the making, also called Str8 No Chaser. I'll link the Substack series in the show notes. But some of the episodes will explore societal ideas we live with every day, but rarely question, at least not out loud. In this episode, we explore how sexual orientation was socially constructed. You heard that correctly. By power, culture, science, and society. I'll get to the science in a moment. From the ancient world to the Victorian era, from colonization to Kinsey, we'll unpack how behavior became identity and how that identity got fenced in. Now, first off, what is social construction? Well, Merriam-Webster defines a social construct as an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in society. So the term social construction is aptly named, or it could be called social political construction, because how we view or define each other is largely influenced by politics. As the saying goes, the people in power create the perception. For example, class distinctions are a social construct. Race distinctions are a social construct. Not the hues of our skin, but how we interpret or view skin color is race, which is a social construct. For example, someone in Brazil could be viewed as white and as Hispanic or Latino in America. Take 3. Or the way societies define and assign gender roles, behaviors, and identities is shaped by cultural norms and expectations, a social construct, rather than being solely determined by biology. So we're accustomed to boys are supposed to wear blue, girls are supposed to wear pink. But there was a time in recent history when boys wore pink and girls wore blue. PBS Origins covered this topic. I'll share the link in the show notes. Now, let's return to sexual orientation. For most, sexual orientation seems like a fixed truth, like eye color or blood type. But for most of human history, people didn't walk around calling themselves or others straight or gay or bi or questioning. Sexuality was viewed as an act, not an orientation or identity. It was what you did, not who you were. Yet, in the last 160 years, terms like homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual, queer, fluid, pansexual, and asexual have become fixtures in how we define or judge ourselves and each other. But where did these labels come from? And what purpose do they serve today? People have always had same-sex encounters. From Mesopotamia to China, from pre-colonial Africa to Latin America, same-sex relationships and partnerships existed, often without any identity label attached. In ancient Greece and Rome, male-male intimacy was idealized in many contexts. Same-sex behavior is even common among non-human animals, more than even scientists initially acknowledged. Several emperors, rulers, and royals had same-sex relationships. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, was primarily attracted to men and boys. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, best known for his seminal Meditations, a book of his journals, exchanged love letters with his instructor. But sexual roles were often tied to power and race. So the emperor would be the dominant or insertive partner, while engaging in same-sex acts and still be considered masculine or normal, whatever that is. A servant, slave, or boy would be the passive or penetrative partner. To say nothing of situational sexual behavior within homosocial environments like military units, fraternities, clergy communities, sports, single-sex educational institutions, etc., or male sex workers paid to have sex with men, dating back to early human civilization. In many ways, they were less constrained than we are today. There wasn't a need to define orientation because there was no concept of orientation. Yet, within those same societies, hierarchy and misogyny still shaped whose behavior was deemed acceptable, not to mention sex with minors. As with today, the level of acceptance of sexual behavior between men depended on, quote-unquote, the people in position of power. Case in point, between the 15th and 19th centuries, colonialism and the Victorian-era significantly reshaped global politics, economics, and cultures, introducing patriarchal structures that diminished the influence of women, suppressed gender and sexual fluidity, and scrutinized personal conduct. By the 1860s, there was heightened urgency to explain same-sex behavior through a biological lens to mitigate societal scrutiny, religious condemnations, and legal persecution faced by homosexual individuals. Terms homosexual and heterosexual were first coined on the same day, May 6, 1868. The term bisexual was first utilized in 1892 to describe someone who engaged in sexual activity with both male and female partners. But the term bisexual was first used in 1792 to describe a flower or plant that contains both male and female productive organs. At first, these terms were exclusively used by medical and psychological fields who began to pathologize same-sex behavior. Figures like Richard von Krafft-Ebing, Magnus Hirschfeld, and Sigmund Freud helped see the idea that same-sex desire was abnormal or neurotic rather than natural and healthy. Even heterosexuality was originally framed as a morbid passion for the opposite sex. More on that in a future episode. Origins of the term sexual orientation are less documented. The Oxford English Dictionary cites 1931 as its earliest evidence of the term sexual orientation. And it was around this time that heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, gay, and straight entered the public lexicon. So our views of sexual orientation were largely shaped by science, religion, culture, and power, but it's unclear how much science was there. Medical and psychological fields largely based their theories on studying their patients in hospitals or institutions. In fact, it wasn't until the 1940s and 50s that the first systematic, statistically analyzed data collection of sexual orientation took place. More on Alfred Kinsey's landmark study in the next episode. But for fewer than 100 years, we've branded our respective sexualities and labeled, mislabeled, or persecuted people for how they sexually identify or behaved, for doing sexual acts performed throughout all of human civilization and likely before. And despite the reality that few of us have actually studied or read much about sexual behavior and the origins of sexual orientation. Here's why this matters. In today's social-political climate, identity labels are both lifelines and weapons. For many, they provide community and clarity. But for others, especially those exploring same-sex behavior outside of conventional identities, labels can be limiting, suffocating, and often irrelevant. So, with all that said, is sexual orientation real? Well, it's real in how we live and love, but it's also shaped by power, culture, history, and in the earliest studies of sexual orientation, highly questionable methods. If we understand that, maybe we stop obsessing over what to call ourselves and start paying more attention to how we treat each other. For what began as sexual acts or behavior became sexual orientation, however clumsily, and referenced today as sexual identity. But what do these terms mean? How do they differ? And what do younger generations think of these labels? More on this in the next episode of Str8 No Chaser. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Until then, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and ensure they're being good to you. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.